The running back market had some movement this offseason. And today we're talking about three of those players who coincidentally are all coming off injuries. One of them a major injury. What's their outlook? We're going to find out because bienvenidos and welcome to the Injury Prone Podcast. I'm Jorge Martin, and here is El Doctor, Edwin Porras, compa. We've talked about the running back so much. This is episode 2 of our series. And in fact, we've talked about this position probably more than all other positions just because there are so many car crashes that these guys get into. So I haven't asked you this before, but with so many guys getting pretty healthy second contracts, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and those are just two of them. Those guys getting paid this season. Does it make you kind of consider some of these players when it comes to time to draft them in fantasy in August?
Yeah, you start to view first, second contracts. Ryan Eath has done a really good job at looking at second contracts. So really what you're doing here is you're assuming, okay, maybe this guy lost a step. Maybe this guy, they want to change his workloads, right? And so you really have to dissect every guy specifically individually to really get an idea of what was going on, right? So, J.K. Dobbins is going to be different than Austin Ekeler, is going to be different than Rhamondre Stevenson, right? So a lot of these guys are getting a little older, like you said, a little long in the tooth. Josh Jacobs is going to be a different consideration than Austin Ekeler. So really, we just need to sort of break down how these guys are going to look on their new teams, how these guys are going to look after an injury, and are they washed or are they not washed? And that's really the question that we're trying to answer here.
Yeah, that one's going to be tough. I mean, because I think you've used it where it's the adolescents who are coming in and contributing right away at the running back position, and in some cases, guys are really done by that rookie contract. But now we're seeing guys coming in, and I think this is going to be a little bit of a test case when it comes to like a Saquon or a Jacobs, how they do, or kind of like the first guy that we're going to talk about. But before we get into him, I want to make sure you are liking and subscribing the Injury Prone Podcast on YouTube. Make sure you get in there and that you've subscribed wherever you get your podcasts if you want the audio one. But compa, so the first player we're going to talk about, he was kind of the subject of a healthy debate that I had between one of my other compadres in the fantasy industry, where mi amigo, he said that Ekeler was done. Because he was running so slowly last year. I think he even used the term that he was running with a refrigerator on his back. And I said he wasn't done, just had a nagging ankle injury because he had the high ankle sprain that can stick with guys. So Austin Ekeler, we're gonna talk about him, leading off right now. So when you have a player like Austin Ekeler, who has been so productive, but he goes into he's late 20s now. I believe he's going to his age 28 season, so it's starting to get, as you mentioned, long in the tooth. But week 1 last year, he looked great. 164 total yards on 20 touches in that week 1 game, but then he suffered a high ankle sprain and then missed the next 3 games, and including their bye week. It just didn't look the same the rest of the way. Totaled out 864 total yards in 14 games. But compa, when someone has had a high ankle sprain, how long does it really take before they're fully recovered? And when we see a guy like Ekeler doing step ups with 315 pounds on a barbell on Instagram, like he showed in March, is that a good indicator that, hey, maybe that ankle's healthy?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to consider, right? He's obviously doing a lot. And what you worry about with high ankles is that you do get that effect where a guy isn't really back until, week 4, 5, 6. They can come back in week 2, 3 after the high ankle sprain, but they're not really back until, that 5 to 6 week period when they start to feel a little bit better. Or honestly, they never feel better until the season ends, because an NFL workload will just drain on you that way. No, he didn't look good. No, he didn't total a lot of yards. He didn't really help you from a fantasy perspective. But, Cliff Kingsbury, God bless him, fails his way to some of the most incredible opportunities in life. Anyway, he can do a couple things well. One of them is throw the ball side to side, lateral. He won't get you up and down the field, but he'll definitely get it, side to side. And the other thing that he's pretty decent at, based on my reading and understanding of people who are smarter than I am, is that he actually designs a pretty good run game. So the question with Austin Ekeler, just like it is with a lot of these running backs, is he going to get enough volume? What is his current ADP that you said?
He's running back 33, and he's going off at number 107 right now. So it's kind of like the ninth round. The ninth round of the underdog drafts. That feels like
that feels pretty late. Are we really thinking that him and Brian Thomas,
Robinson,
Brian Robinson, are we really thinking that he's going to steal that much volume, right? Like, how much are they going to rely on Austin Ekeler? Because when Cliff was in Arizona, I mean, James Conner was the man, right? James Conner was the guy who got most of the workloads, right? And so I don't know. If I had to project forward, I'd probably anticipate this is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, at worst for Ekeler, like a 60-40 split. Because I think Ekeler still got him, man. And if there's one thing that I've learned, and this is going to get soapboxy, narrative-y, and you know how I usually don't roll that way, but Austin Ekeler is going to be 29 in 4 days. So he's going into his 29th season. I'm not saying it's a smart investment and like go get Austin Ekeler everywhere, but if there's ever been a guy who can emerge, if you want to call, you can say he's in the dead zone. What you can also say is that he's in an ambiguous backfield, right? And as we know from a lot of JJ Zacharyason's work, ambiguous backfields are probably the bet that you want to make. Now, in most cases, do you want to bet on the aging veteran who switched teams, is on his third contract at this point? No, not usually. But again, this is where it's going to get a little bit narrative-y. Austin Ekeler's got that dog in him. And everything that we know, because he's been so immersed in the fantasy community, is that he's one of those guys that he really can step it up and he really can perform at a higher level, even if he sort of wills his body to get to that point. So I think that Austin Ekeler still got some juice. I think that he's worth a 9th round investment, especially if you go, like you're saying, 0 RB. Like, I would probably be targeting Austin Ekeler in the 9th round. That seems really, really, really low right now. Obviously, it probably will correct itself. But if I had to pick one guy to emerge from this backfield and still show that he's got a little bit of juice, it's probably Austin Ekeler.
Yeah, because if you're going to take a chance on anybody, it's going to be a running back who's caught a lot, who has a history of catching a lot of passes, and he is. He is one of the best, the best running backs. Can you hear me okay? I so agree, because when it comes to running backs, I want to bet on the guy who catches a lot of passes. I want to bet on the guy who's been an elusive runner, who doesn't take the big hits all the time. And I mean, our amigo Scott Barrett likes to say it's every target is worth 2.7 what a rush attempt is worth. So you want to make sure, you want to take a chance with him. You're getting him in the 9th round. If you're going with a 0 RB build or even a hero RB and he's your second running back, I love that chance. Or the 3rd running back in that one. I've been grabbing him. He is one of the guys that I'm targeting in underdog drafts and I've got 7 going on right now. I look at him. That also, when you look at the NFC West, the Eagles have been good. Their defense was very leaky by the end of the season, but the Giants were not good against the run last year, and the Cowboys were not good against the run last year. And Ekeler was good in the red zone, but he's also just, it may be the best, if he's not the best running back catching passes after Christian McCaffrey. It's not long that they're taking roll calls. So love Austin Ekeler this year at that value. I think it's a great one.
I think the last thing I want to say too is, like, I know that it's not a 1-to-1 comparison, but if James Conner can continue to do what he's doing at this age and has continued to do, which, by the way, opposite boat with James Conner, I'm not sure how much longer he can actually do it, but especially with the rookie they just drafted. But if James Conner can do what he's doing at this age, and I don't think there's any reason why Austin Ekeler, who's been better than James Conner, can't continue to give you at least what 90% Austin Ekeler at his peak was.
And healthier. So Eckler's got much better injury history. So, okay. Now it's time to talk about J.K. Dobbins, who, compa, I mean, it's just such a promising career. And then in year 2, before year 2, in training camp of year 2, torn ACL. comes back, kind of fights through. He's pretty productive there at the end of year 3. And then last year 4 with the Baltimore Ravens, tears his Achilles in his first game. So he's got a fresh start, sort of, with the Ravens West that are that playing for the Chargers. So many former Ravens, including the general manager. But J.K. Dobbins is going into a running back committee with Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal. But he doesn't have a lot of money guaranteed. I think a lot of people have really gone on the fact that he's got only $50,000 guaranteed in his deal. But compa, I mean, have the catastrophic injuries kind of hit him enough to the point where it's just really just a lot of red flags going into this season?
Yeah, a lot of red flags. I mean, it's one thing to come back from a complicated ACL that's scarred down and you needed a second procedure for. You don't see guys bounce back from that very often. You don't see guys bounce back from an Achilles on its own very often. So now you're asking a guy to come back from a complicated ACL on top of an Achilles tear. I mean, when guys talk about losing a step, or when fantasy analysts talk about losing a step and looking slower and not being as explosive, there's never been a better case to assume that than with J.K. Dobbins. Now, J.K. Dobbins was averaged like 6 yards per carry or something crazy because he's got such a high speed score. But yards per carry isn't the only thing, right? Like at this point, it's probably there are teams that are looking at him, specifically the team he's on, probably looking at him and saying, I don't know if I can trust this guy to carry the ball, 150, 200 times. That's probably not who he is anymore. That's probably not what the perception of him is anymore. So if you're not going to get the volume and he lacks explosiveness, I just don't see the reason to invest in Mr. J.K. Dobbins, sir. Please don't come at me in the Twitter DMs and the Instagram streets, because I know he comes at fantasy analyst. So Mr. J.K. Dobbins, sir, to me, that's what I call him. But I just, from a fantasy perspective, I just can't see myself really needing. It's just, to me, even if it's your 200th pick, I think it's a waste of a pick.
Right now, he's going off at pick number 158.9 on Underdog Drafts. So not quite 200, but that's well up there. That's it's like 13, like the 14th, 15th round at that point. So our compadre Mauricio Gutierrez, he and J.K. Dobbins got to be really buddy before year 3. So actually, no, it was last summer that they got to be buddy when J.K. Dobbins went down and he met with them. So, but yeah, this is really going to be a muddy backfield. It looks like Gus Edwards is going to be the number 1 guy. Dobbins is going to be battling it out if he makes the team, if he shows that he's good enough. And it's tough because he's got that pedigree. He got drafted in the second round and in the same draft as Jonathan Taylor. So you kind of it's heartbreaking, but yeah, I mean it's at that point you're either picking him or some young wide receivers who could break out, and I think I'm going to be taking chances on those guys, or maybe this second or third quarterback who's coming off the board. I think even like Matthew Stafford is in that range, so that's something that's definitely something to consider at that point. So okay, our the one running back who did not change teams is the one we're going to talk about right now. Rhamondre Stevenson with the New England Patriots. He missed out on a good chunk of the end of the season there. He was hurt in week 12, and then basically he was out the rest of the season. The Patriots were out of the playoff race. So at first the estimates were that he was going to come back in week 17 or 18, but really they ended up putting him on IR when they knew they were out of contention. On February 19th, just a little bit after the Super Bowl, he came out and pronounced himself as ready to play if there were a game. Obviously, there would not be another game for almost 7 more months. But with the team really kind of like doing a whole overhaul, they only added Antonio Gibson, and their offensive coordinator, Alex
Man,
Van
you got a promotion, huh?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I just wanted to, since Scott Van Pelt and I have the same haircuts, I wanted to actually give him a little, give him a little extra love. But Alex Van Pelt, he is, he's been with Cleveland, who really emphasizes the running game. Not having had surgery, compa, I'm kind of a little bit wheels up on Rhamondre. ¿Qué dices?
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason not to be up on Rhamondre Stevenson. I mean, he had that high ankle sprain. I think it was a high ankle sprain. I'm going off the top of my head with this. But yeah, so he had the high ankle sprain. Obviously, that's going to knock him out. But his age is fine. Now, the offense. What are we going to do about that offense? What are we going to do about that whole situation? I don't know. So will the opportunities be there? Probably, right? Like he's probably, again, I would be surprised if it's more than a 60-40 split in Rhamondre Stevenson's favor with Antonio Gibson. So, the opportunities will be there. I will say Gibson, even though he profiles as like a pass catching back, I don't think he has caught any more passes on a per attempt basis, per snap basis than Rhamondre. Rhamondre can do just as much, right? I think they'll use Antonio Gibson to spell Rhamondre Stevenson, who has come out himself and said like he feels worn down by the end of the season when he has to carry the full workload. So I think that this is a good opportunity for Rhamondre Stevenson. I just don't know how good that offense is going to be. In turn, I don't know how many yards they're going to accumulate. And in turn, I don't know how many touchdowns they're going to score. So, I don't know where Rhamondre is going. Where's Rhamondre gone?
He is RB20 and going off at number 75.7 overall. So
I'll
right
take
there,
Ekeler
about the 7th round.
I'll take Ekeler before him. I'll take Ekeler before him.
And actually, you can wait on Ekeler a little bit more to get to them. You could wait another 32 picks to get Ekeler. So grab another couple of wide receivers or two. I'm kind of feeling that Rhamondre could be a guy that like in a 0 RB build. I think he's a guy in that running back dead zone that could be a safe pick because I mean, you're right. That offense no va a ser bueno, but it may be a very basic offense where they really try and establish the run. Shout out Adam Levitan. But yeah, I think Rhamondre is going to be. It may end up being a guy who carries the ball north of 200 times this year. But you're right. I don't know how much he's going to catch the ball because he might actually get limited because Antonio Gibson is going to be getting plenty of balls there. So, all right. Last guy we're going to talk about is one of the guys who changed teams, Josh Jacobs. Left the Raiders. He had that monster 2022 season where he almost got 400 touches, 394. Then last year he sat out some time. He got a quad injury in week 13 and then we never saw him again. So maybe he was making a business decision with free agency coming up, but he's a guy who's tied for 18th with 11.1 fantasy points per game. But, compa, they talk so much about guys who get heavy workloads like Jacobs did in 2022 that they're that the next season they have a step backward. Is the infrastructure there on what really is a much better offense that really utilized the running game during its playoff run last year with Aaron Jones?
Yeah, Josh Jacobs is only 26. So I don't know where the big sort of scare is with him. Now, people, yes, they lose their minds about this random 300 touch cliff that has never really been established from a data perspective. It's not tied to, it's just an arbitrary number. People say, oh, you go over 300 touches and all of a sudden you spontaneously combust. The people that has happened to, the running backs that has happened to, has usually been because of the exposure. And when you get the exposure, you get the injuries, right? It's when they get their fractures, right? That's when they get their high ankle sprains. That's when they get all these injuries that start to pile up on top of the fact that those older guys are usually the ones that are taking on the veterans that are taking on that big of a load. So they're already probably dropping off and falling off of a cliff anyway. So don't let the touch thing scare you. I mean, the 2022 season couldn't be further removed from the 2023 season. His quad injury had nothing to do with the touches that he had before. We know that this knee injury, this quad injury, sort of came a little bit, towards the end of the season. Now, I don't know, was it before or after they fired McDaniel?
It was during the season that they fired McDaniel. So it was
What
it was
was it?
before his injury. Before his injury.
So they fired McDaniel before his injury. That's interesting. So anyway, I just think, yeah, it sounds like it was a business decision. You have to also consider the fact that he knew he was in a contract year. He probably knew he wasn't going to get another contract. Why would he go out there for a team that isn't going to re-sign him, right? So I think it's overblown. He's 26 years old. You mentioned the Packers. They use the run game. They lean on the run game as much as they do, and I think this is going to be a good spot for him. What's Josh Jacobs' ADP?
It's actually fairly high. He's the RB9 right now, 32.3 overall. So he's going
That's
going
where
in
I'd
the
agree.
third pair.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it, and I think consensus is sort of agreeing with me there that Josh Jacobs is, despite missing those games and whatever the case may be about the touches, the public's still taking him pretty high. So I sort of agree with consensus there. I don't know if I would take him quite that high, but I can see it.
Could you consider yourself going receiver in an underdog draft, and then maybe grabbing Jacobs as like your anchor?
That could be a really good strategy. I wouldn't mind that. Swing to the 9th round, grab Austin Ekeler, right?
Yes.
Continue to fill out in between there. Continue to fill out wide receiver, tight end. I would do it. I take Anthony. Where's Anthony Richardson going? Like the 6th?
Anthony Richardson, yeah, it's like 5th or 6th round right now.
Oh God, I would take Anthony Richardson 1 overall if I could. Even single quarterback leads. I'm so excited for Anthony Richardson. So yeah, man, that would be really good. Wide receiver, maybe tight end, right? Swing, grab, or wide receiver, Josh Jacobs, tight end, wide receiver, Anthony Richardson. I'm already salivating thinking about it.
Man. By the way, amigos and amigas, make sure to check out the couple episodes ago we talked about Anthony Richardson. So if you haven't seen that episode, finish this one and then go back to that one. So a lot of good stuff there. You're going to see why Edwin is very high on the Anthony Richardson going into the season. So compa, this was good. So you know what, I got for our cultura class right now, I played golf the other day with one of my buen amigos, one of my high school compadres, and when we got into it, when my compadre hit into a sand trap, I told him that George Lopez, our patron saint of Mexicans who do stand-up comedy, and also one of the hit show George Lopez, he has a saying, I never rake because if I do, then I'm another Mexican who's gardening. So do you play and do you rake, and will you rake after this?
I do not play golf. I don't know how to play golf. I went to Top Golf one time. I hacked at a bunch of balls and my back hurt the next day. I have no interest in playing golf. Apparently it's fun, but I don't see the fun in just hitting a ball and then walking 200 yards to get to the next point, right? Probably more than that if you're bad. So no, I don't play, and I probably will not rake after this.
Well, I will say I don't play as often as I'd like to. I picked it up, before kids were around in our lives. So if I play a couple times a year, that's a lot. But I'm never going to be good, but it's really about the people you're playing with, and that's that. So I would play with you, even we can hang out in a cart and drink cerveza and tequila all afternoon, as long as we could get someone to drive us home.
That I could do.
All right, compa, let's get out of here. Let's call it a show. So close things up. Amigos, amigas, make sure you're checking out the Injury Prone Podcast on YouTube. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a comment on here. You might get it. One of us might actually give you a comment right back. So throw it in there. So also,
the cheat code is to just give us a compliment, and I'll probably reply to it on Twitter or here.
Muy bien, exactamente. And also, you want to make sure you're checking out the Pro Athlete PT podcast. Any sneak peeks, compa?
Yeah, just published part 1 of how to keep your arm healthy as a baseball and softball player. Go over to the Pro Athlete Physical Therapy, the podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts. Subscribe, rate, review. I would really appreciate if you would actually leave a review if it's a 5-star review, because that's really going to help the numbers sort of bump up there. So yeah.
Yeah, let's help the compadre out. Yeah, getting a second podcast. So yes, make sure you're following him on Twitter at FB Injury Doc. You can follow me at Jorge Martin 17. You're going to see my content at RotoWire, at Yahoo, and at Fantasy Pros, football and baseball. So baseball right now, but football's coming. So amigos y amigas, we're going to get out of here. Vámonos, compa. Muchas gracias for joining us. Salud.